At Gear Challenge, and whenever possible, we prefer the concepts of ecologically sound practices and the use of repurposing products or recycling products. Now, with that in mind, and with the recent change of cigar humidors, that is desktop style cigar humidors, to a large cabinet style humidor, and instead of merely discarding those humidors and those humidification devices which are displayed here, I've been thinking about this and would prefer, if at all possible, to repurpose these humidification devices. Now, as described earlier, these are humidification devices that use a more traditional floral foam packaging in the inside to soak up water and to maintain the humidity level inside a humidor. We have gone to the, in this case, Cigar Caddy humidification beads, and those have proven to be working quite well. So we'll be utilizing humidification beads, and we will be replacing the floral foam inserts with the humidification beads, if in fact that will work. Using a trusty Gerber multi-tool, we will access a couple of these and remove the foam, if possible, of course. Now, the foam on this case is beginning to disintegrate and will require, oh, I thought I was going to have to break it up, but it did come right out. And this will also require some cleaning. There's still some dampness on the inside of this case. On a few of these other cases, you can note that there is some evidence of mold that has cropped up through the openings. And on this case, this cylindrical case, there's grating on both sides. On this cylindrical case, there's only grating on one side. This case has the hardened foam insert and has grating on both sides. And on this one, we have grating on only one side. No real evidence of any mold. But again, on at least half of these, we do have some, almost half of these, we have some evidence of mold. So, in removing this one, we will attempt to remove this one as well. Oh, that popped open relatively easily. And perhaps with, okay, those pins, there were pins on this one, so that came out relatively easy as well. And this is a kind of dissecting these, so you can tell that there's a definite difference in the foam material. This is more like a hardened sponge. This is more like what I have seen in traditional floral foam floral foam packaging. This one, they're both breaking apart. I doubt that I'm exposing myself to any kind of hazmat of any kind. It'd be kind of ridiculous to get into that type of a mindset. Let's see if we can remove this one. Notice that there's a seam back here. And this one may be glued closed. Nope, looks like it is coming apart. Okay, that came out very easily. So, as you can see, a lot of these cases are not necessarily glued into place. And wow, this foam piece is quite hard and quite brittle. I'm not going to try and break it, it might disintegrate a little too much. The interior of this case is nice and dry. They could still all stand a bit of a cleaning. On this, oh, that's nice and soft. And this one is coming out as well. And that's interesting, there's a bit of a grating a nylon mesh screen and more hard foam, more similar to that rectangular floral foam. This one is quite dry as well. Now these have been out for approximately 14 days. And interesting that it has an ASP, looks like ASP Premier with a floral pattern there. Again, we're just dissecting these. Wasn't even planning on dissecting these, but I believe that this will be able to be repurposed as well. Now, these are a different type of construction and may in fact not be very easily removed. They do not appear to be threaded. This one does not appear to have any threading either, or reverse threading. And we'll see if we can use the can opener part. And it does not seem to want to cooperate with disassembly. So these may actually have some type of adhesive holding them together. Attempting to put some additional pressure on the can opener part of the Gerber tool, and it does not want to cooperate. I would imagine that this should, if it's intended to come apart, should be coming apart relatively quickly, or much more easily than this. And I really don't want to cause any extensive damage if I can avoid it, so we're taking a little bit more care. Well, these two may require some additional assembly applications or disassembly applications, and we'll get to those later. Again, the foam material, the floral foam, appears to be just a vast array of different styles and materials. So we'll get to cleaning these up, and we'll go into the process of using the humidification beads shortly. The desktop style humidor humidification cases have cleaned up very well. This rectangular case had quite a bit of moisture on the interior. Once the foam was removed, there was no evidence that I was able to detect of any mold, but yet using some very warm tap water, some scrubbing with a slight hint of hydrogen peroxide solution added just in the event that there might have been some residual mold anywhere, was used to clean all of these up. And as you can see, they've all cleaned up and dried out quite thoroughly. These are the 4 that appear to be useful for repurposing. The nylon screen on this cleaned up. There's a little bit of staining on it from the pattern of the slats, but other than that, it also cleaned up very, very well. Now, for the purpose of describing exactly how we're going to repurpose these humidification devices, and instead of using the floral foam, we'll be using the humidity beads. This is an example of the dry humidity beads as they come in the original packaging, and also as had been seen when I put together and started the process of the humidor cabinet. So that's the dry version of the beads, and these are 2 examples of the humidified beads after being exposed to distilled water. You can see that they are about, of course there's a variance in the amount of humidity or the amount of water that each bead absorbs. The smaller one here is just about as soft and supple as the larger bead, but you can see that they both are at least double the size of the dry beads, and maybe even a little more so than that. So that gives an example of just how much moisture the humidity beads absorb. Matter of fact, they're kind of sticking, the dry ones are sticking or wanting to stick to this larger of the 2. Now, the way that I found easiest to humidify, if that's the proper word, the beads, if they are not already in a case, as you know, Cigar Caddy also makes the plastic cases. The method that I used was to use a lady's nylon stocking and to fill it up with the dry beads. This helps to avoid any mess. And then to tie off the nylon stocking, and then to, in this case I used a titanium bowl that has obviously been worse for wear, but again not needed to be discarded at this point. At least I haven't destroyed this quite yet. And allow the beads to absorb the distilled water. So once that has occurred, then the beads can be applied. Originally I was going to use the beads and place them into the canisters dry and then humidify them in the same way that they were originally humidified from the original purchase and the original acquisition. But I believe that by pre-humidifying or pre-saturating the beads will allow for any accidents of excessive beads in these canisters. So in other words, I'll be able to determine the proper measurement to fill these canisters properly, instead of going with dry beads and then possibly using too many beads and then having to take the canisters apart. We can apply damp or pre-saturated beads. So roll this back to a more open position and attempt to fill the first canister, and they feel a bit like salmon eggs or fish eggs or caviar for those who have indulged in that. So that appears to be a nice top off of this particular canister. Place the screen inside what we'll call the lid, or the opening part, and snap the pieces together. So now we have a loaded and good to go humidification device for the inside of a humidor, and repurposed it. This one does not have a screen, and just by experimentation, dry beads do not seem to want to fall through it. That was a damp one. So even if these beads completely dry out, we will probably not lose any through the openings. This one will be a little more difficult to add to. Probably going to lose some on the side. But I think that this canister will work very well on the inside of some of those desktop style humidors. That looks about topped off. And I don't know if I'll need to use adhesive on these pins or not. We'll try snapping it into place and see how well that holds. Actually, they seem to squeeze right into place. And again, now we have, and you can even check the status of those beads and possibly even add more if necessary. Try to speed this up just a bit. Once again, dry beads will not go through the holes or the openings on this one. And adding some pre-saturated humidification beads is relatively easy. They really do look like roe or fish eggs. Really don't want to overdo it, but the humidity beads are not that expensive, so even if you lose some, it's really not that much of a concern. This one seems to be just about topped off as well. And actually, I think that the cap piece for this will depress into, well, seem to fit just fine. So that one's loaded and maybe just a bit overloaded, but we still have the plastic hook and loop here that can be glued to the interior of one of the other humidors. This one will be a little more tricky because there's a bit of an offset on each end for these to sandwich together. And of course they're almost identical, so that means there won't be one side that will be more forgiving than the other. So this will probably end up with a looser content of humidity beads than the other canisters were. And we have one dry one left. Let's see if this one goes through. It does not quite, a dry bead does not quite, well, it can be forced through, but it doesn't just simply fall through. So that's good news too. Try and play this one out. And I think we'll be able to snap this one into place in just a moment. I'm going to add just a few more, just so I don't have to redo it. Now these will fit together with these side pins that fit into slats or slots on the side. And there you have it. That is fit together as well. And just judging by the amount loaded, I can probably add a little more to that. So the other advantage to using the nylon stocking as a container is the nylon will be, you know, I guess hypoallergenic, for lack of a better word, and would not promote any type of mold or problem issue that I'm aware of. And of course they hold the beads quite nicely in the dry state or in the humidified state. So we'll check these out and see how these work in the cases.